Yes, he's back! I'm going to compare all of the incarnations of this guy to try and figure out which is the most powerful. Power in terms of physical power, alt mode power, influence, schemes, and intelligence. And we're going to be comparing the designs as we go along too. So I knocked up a little table right here, and I'm going to slot them all in there. For those that don't know, that there on the right is the Shockwave logo. Yes, he has his own logo. Like he's got his own graphic designer chain up in a basement somewhere. He's like, make the logo bigger. Ah, fuck it. Well, I thought it was cool. Anyway, hit like on the video and subscribe if you're new, because there's loads of cool stuff coming up on the channel, even in the midst of this great Transformer depression that we're currently in the middle of. There's going to be loads of stuff for you here. Okay, let's go! Marvel Comics introduced us to this icon of a bot, and here he is in his very first panel ever. Just casually stepping over a Diplodocus here. Design-wise, he instantly stood out because of his cubed head and his Cyclops yellow eye. His pronounced shelf chest that sometimes I just want to put some window ledge plants on, you know? They'll get good light there. As well as his trademark blaster arm. His alt mode at this stage was the gun mode, which because of mass shifting meant he could turn into this enormous pistol. The increase in size definitely also scaling up his firepower. That's some sort of propulsion system that allowed him to fly. Another thing I find quite interesting is the sight that sits on top of his gun mode, which we all know is for the benefit of whoever is holding him. But in the Marvel run, I don't think that ever happened. I can't remember ever seeing it. So my logic is that this is part of an advanced tracking and targeting system. His chest is drawn as kind of like a grill, like the grill you sometimes get on the radiators of cars, as if it were a way to draw airflow through for cooling. In other panels, this is just flat. And yeah, inconsistent. This incarnation has been seen to be strong enough to rip a bot in two with his bare hands. It also has the strange ability to blast out a laser from his eye and fry loads of fish. I've also seen him use it as like a mechanical tool to make adjustments to stuff. Pretty much the first thing he did after being awoken from stasis was horrifically violent, blasting away the flesh from a live T-Rex before using his blaster against the whole Dinobot crew. He got beat, but these are 5 Dinobots here. Anyway, this thing wasn't just a weapon. I've also seen it used as a tool, like here when he's working on Optimus's severed head. I don't know if he's welding or what, but it shows that his blaster could be dialed down to a much lower and much more precise setting, like a surgical laser. Anyway, right from the get-go, Megatron was talking about one of his most powerful being sidelined, and of course he's talking about Shockwave. And when Shockwave does turn up, he goes up against the Dinobots, fighting all 5 of them to a stalemate before they got trapped in a tar pit. He took out a whole squad of Autobots in a single shot. Then whilst they were unconscious, dragged off their bodies, strung them up like stuck pigs, and then decapitated Optimus. Right here, he held his own against Optimus for a couple of panels before getting slung into a stinky swamp. He beats a Guardian robot right here. He beats Megs right here, threatening to rip his head off his shoulders and then humiliating him by forcing him to beg for his life. The second time they fought, they were interrupted, and the third time, he manipulated events so that Megs got pulled through a space bridge, making it look like he died and leaving him to take the throne. He blasted Cyclonus right here, and shot Scourge here. Not sure what he did to this guy's crotch. He obviously had his fun, you know what I mean? He did get beaten by Buster Witwicky in a battlesuit, who takes advantage of his single eye and throws a bunch of sand all up in it to blind him. Would that work though? Which forced him to withdraw. Like, are we saying that his eye is sensitive somehow? He was defeated and sent plummeting to Earth by Fort Max. And he got blasted by Circuit Breaker right here. But ultimately his worst beating came at the hands of both Galvatron and Megatron. But who the hell would survive that? So given the nature of the defeats, like this one is understandable, this one they played him dirty, this one is against a Superman level superhero, Fort Max is one of the most powerful Autobots ever, and he came pretty close to beating him by blasting his headmaster Cerebros. Compared to who he beat, Megs, the Dinobots, etc., you combine that all with that unfeeling, ruthless streak that we're going to be seeing again and again, I reckon this incarnation is top tier in terms of power. Now, there was an alternate version of this character from another universe in Marvel Future UK. Now, this guy was beaten by RC. Well, he sent his troops in to die first, then ran away before fighting her. He got beaten by Hot Rod. Well, again, he ran away after Hot Rod tackled him down a hill, and he got beaten by Death's Head. He didn't get to run away there. This guy blew Shockwave apart and blew him to crumbs and crushed his memory module, killing him permanently. Big defeat there. So this variant of the character, not so great. Earth Force Shockwave did manage to overpower Megatron, although he did have some help from the Triple Change crew. In another battle, he got nutted by Grimlock. That forced him to back off. And in another one, he got impaled pretty hard, courtesy of Grimlock's Energon sword. He once again went up against the Dinobots in Secrets and Lies. Shockwave defeated them, once again taking them all out with one almighty blast from his gun mode. And the way he transforms into the flame and just walks through is just dope. He would have beaten all the Dinobots here as well. First punching Grimlock into Sludge, swinging Swoop into Snarl, beam clashing and winning the beam clash with Slag, And it was only because Grimlock pepped himself up with some Energo crack or whatever that he didn't bury them all that day and punched Shockwave into a mountain, knocking him offline. So overall, in terms of physical power, Marvel's Shockwave started out pretty OP before getting nerfed somewhat, which I think was them trying to readdress the balance. He's got to get some more points for his intelligence here too. While wired into the Arc system, he lifted the mental blocks Megatron had placed on Starscream, restoring his intelligence and voice. This gave him an ally and pilot when he lacked his own physical autonomy because, well, look at him. He manipulated Scourge, Cyclonus, and Deathhead into going on a mission together, knowing that they were probably off each other and getting rid of a few of his rivals. He used Starscream to outsmart Galvatron right here, but his single most impressive feat of genius was the whole decapitation storyline, because this was him using knowledge in Opie's head to study the creation matrix. And remember, this was a metaphysical artifact that the Autobots themselves didn't really understand, before he reverse engineered it and used it to create new Decepticon life. So all round, I feel like this is quite a strong incarnation. Some very impressive victories, an insanely powerful alt mode, and often the driving force behind the cons. So I'm going to put it in second place, at least for now. Quick skippable interlude to tell you that GamerSupps is having a holy sheets drop on Friday 24th of October with cups, keychains, mousepads, t-shirts that glows in the dark, and a very, very, very cool hoodie. And if you use the code NORMZONE, you get free shipping. And even if you're too late for the drop, my code NORMZONE will get you 10% off. GamerSupps, made from man milk. I heard that on another video somewhere. G1's design was superficially very similar, with a few standout differences. His eye could be used as a scanning and reprogramming device, and according to the production Bible, he could make up to 5 holographic duplicates of himself. The only time I can think of that I've seen this, though, was in Transformers Devastation.
Welcome to Cybertron.
He could also light up his chest to create a huge shaft of light.
Where are your Autobot friends?
And of course, he's able to hold himself. Now, weirdly enough, I've seen Shockwave have regular hands, and I thought that was just an animation error until I saw the same thing in the Marvel comics. And then coming back to G1, I noticed in this shot right here, again, look, he's carrying Energon with a regular hand, and then he can swap it to his blaster hand. So it's obviously interchangeable. Anyway, as we know, Megatron put Shockwave in charge of Cybertron whilst he went to attack the Ark. Of course, not knowing that he would have to rule for 4 million years. The cartoon made it seem like Cybertron was fairly empty in this period, although there were pockets of Autobot resistance. Now, although he still boasted massive firepower, the cartoon pushed his physical attributes to the background, emphasizing his scientific and strategic skills. And although he battled with the Dinobots, Ironhide, he blasted the female Autobots off of a bridge with his cannon right here, but he definitely had more defeats than victories. You know, that was the nature of G1. Good guys always win in the end. That's just the way it was.
So much for Shockwave.
It was really his smarts that made big differences to the war effort. They meant that he invented space bridge tech, even one space bridge powerful enough to transport all of Cybertron at one point. He invented a bunch of Sentinels who captured the Dinobots and enslaved them. He helped locate the key to the supercomputer Vector Sigma.
The key to Vector Sigma.
And upon studying the key, found out that it had the ability to make organic matter into metal. This was invaluable information that would have given Megs the ability to cyberform Earth and genocide all of humans, and all of life on Earth, in fact. The plan was foiled by Silverbolt, though, who viewed it good, and the cons were like, well, that's a bit shit. How are we going to genocide now? Not only did he build a teleportation device, he built a fucking time machine called the Chronosphere, and reactivated a Guardian robot to turn on the Autobots. After the Chronosphere was destroyed, I don't know why he didn't try to build another one, considering it's literally the key to fucking everything. I speak about his smarts, but, you know, he did get fooled by Elita 1's crew right here. Yeah, basically, he managed to track the female Autobots' super secret base down. That was smart. And he trapped them in there. That was also pretty smart. But he wasn't able to stop them detonating the Energon that they'd plundered, which allowed them to escape. He lost the Decepticon HQ on Cybertron when he was beaten by the Combaticons when they went rogue. He was betrayed by Starscream right after, but their fight was interrupted by the Combaticons who took them prisoner, and they had to be freed by OP and Megs. And he led the con forces when Cybertron was attacked by Unicron, where he was presumably killed. Now, in an alternate timeline, someone obviously did rebuild the Chronosphere, because Ravage took this character outside of his own timeline, outside of time itself, and gave him a powerful new Binal-Tech body. He looks like he transformed into a Honda by the look of it. He was responsible for attacking Prowl's shuttle, leading to Prowl's demise. Basically, his spark was lost when he tried to transfer his consciousness through subspace. Okay, so the G1 incarnation, I'm going to put him lower on the list than the Marvel incarnation, as he's definitely more of a strategist and administrator rather than a combat blitzkrieg powerhouse. But don't get me wrong, he is no less dangerous, with his ability to science up literally universe-altering tech.
My heart goes out to you.
So fairly low marks for physical power because of all the defeats we've got going on in here. His alt mode was pretty irrelevant, considering nothing he ever shot at actually died. His schemes were pretty crazy, and they steered a lot of the con's direction, so high scores in the influence and schemes categories, and off the effing charts in the intelligence categories because of the time machine and all that stuff. So I'm slotting him in at number 7. Okay, what about the animated incarnation? So this guy is pretty drastically different, mainly in the fact that he can shapeshift, able to change his voice, his appearance, and even his energy signature. It was these abilities that made Megatron seek him out and appoint him in the first place, recognizing the potential of a spy who could infiltrate the highest levels of enemy ranks. And so he set about his grand scheme of climbing up the ranks of the military hierarchy in a plan that must have taken hundreds of years. A bot willing to do this has to be totally detached from his own life and willing to sink literally everything into the mission. I've just started notes on a video called Shockwave's Most Elaborate Schemes, by the way. I probably won't be ready for a while, but I can already tell that one's going to be pretty awesome. Another big difference is that Animated portrayed him as a loyal servant of Megatron, like in G1, whereas the majority of continuities set him up as kind of a rival. This guy also had emotions, at one point being seen to point and laugh at Lugnut. But just focusing on his design for a sec, there was the long arm variant. Now this was when he wanted to resume his true form temporarily before going back undercover. So of course he kept the long arm color scheme. His ailerons are now these sharp antlers, which I've seen not only rotating around the place, but also emitting beams of electricity. His eye has a pupil. In fact, his whole head is more like Whirl's than classic Shockwave. These massive razor-sharp claws instead of the gun arm. Skinnier legs, I find. Definitely skinnier hips. With much wider shoulders, because these are clearly the tank tracks from his alt mode. He also has these thrusters on the side of his pelvis for extra strong hip thrusts, I guess, but he would later ditch the grey colour scheme in favour of something that we're more familiar with. Now in terms of physical power, he sure packed a wallop. Massive blasts from his tank mode that suppressed B and Bulkhead. He wasn't troubled in the slightest by B's electricity attack right here, and in robot mode his cannon was just as devastating. Note that this one sat on top of his forearm rather than be a replacement for it, but perhaps because of his more slender frame, he struggled in one-on-one combat, especially against the bigger bots. Like he held his own against Bulkhead and B when weapons were involved, but bot to bot, Bulkhead flattened him, just steamrolled him. Lugnut just bounced him across the room a couple of times too. So I guess it stands to reason that as a genius level scientist, he would give himself some of the best weapons, but if you take those away, he becomes quite vulnerable. All that said, it feels like going in all guns blazing was kind of like the last resort for this guy. And I see him more being the ultimate sleeper agent, who definitely preferred covert assassinations to all-out combat. Like he reportedly did with Intel Director Highbrow.
Oh, tally-ho, Bombardier, I appear to be dead.
Which he saw as clearing an obstacle on his way up the hierarchical ladder. And of course the horrendous murder of Blur, that he managed to keep quiet from everyone. This one demonstrated the cold, calculating streak was still there, subjecting our guy to a horrific death without even flinching or even getting his hands dirty. Once Megatron disappeared after his attack on the Autobot ship was scuppered by Starscream planting a bomb on his ass, Shockwave pressured Sentinel to keep searching for Optimus's ship, knowing that that would probably lead to Megatron. Can we look for the ship now? Can we look for... Could I really like Optimus? Can we look for the ship now? Megatron got back in the game though, and ordered Shockwave to start building space bridge tech. And once that was near completed, they plotted to send Optimus through as a test, with Shockwave saying that he would be waiting for their guinea pig to arrive on the other side. This implies that he was confident that he could beat Optimus in a face-to-face. In fact, by the way he said it, it sounds like he thought it wouldn't even be close. At one point, he even attacked Ultra Magnus, inflicting serious damage and stealing his precious Magnus hammer. He inflicted serious damage on Ratchet right here, before he was taken back to Cybertron and paraded before the crowd and then locked up in Triptychon prison. In the follow-up comics, he was surprised to see that Blur had made a comeback.
I'm very surprised to see that you have made a comeback.
And he plotted to finally finish off Ultra Magnus once and for all, as he lay recovering in prison. I say prison, yeah, because he was in jail for flashing his junk at school buses. As he lay recovering in hospital. So he went in there, limbs are stretching, and that's where it backfired big time. He got countered by Ratchet, and ended up being electrocuted by said hammer. And Ultra Magnus pulled a cool power pose. Look at this guy, what a badass. Just don't let him near any school bus. But overall, in terms of power, he was bested in combat a few times, but he could still get the better of most enemies, including when there were multiple of them. I don't feel like this guy could beat a G1 Megatron though, which Marvel Shockwave did more than once. Where he scores the highest though is obviously with his schemes and his influence, so for now I put him somewhere between G1 and Marvel. Let's leave him here for now and maybe change it as we add more. Doesn't speak English, struggles with parachutes, and has a thing for exotic pets. Yes, it's Movieverse Shockwave. Well, Bayverse Shockwave first. Physically, a heavily reimagined incarnation with a few key recognizable aspects. Obviously the eye is still there, glowing a menacing red, set in a far more rounded skeletal head, with exposed mechanics, ridges, and a more insectoid feel. The eye is recessed and sinister, making him look more monstrous than logical. I find the eye much larger in relation to the head in this one, perched above these sharp insect-like mandibles and flanked by these two forward-facing horns that are obviously a replacement for the ailerons. And of course, like with so many other bots, the boxy look got fucked right off in favor of a hulking asymmetrical design, bulkier in the upper body, with jagged armor plating, spines, and ridges everywhere. Sometimes I look at him and I think he looks biomechanical rather than mechanical. His right arm is fused into a massive rotary cannon, almost a living gun with hoses and mechanical tubing connecting it to his body. The other arm is clawed and jagged, and his weapons generally look like an extension of his body rather than clean attachments. He transforms into a Cybertronian tank drill unit that can integrate with the driller creature. And this tank mode is a kind of more grounded, military-like, and far more functional in a realistic war context than the flying gun mode. In terms of character, we're now dealing with more of a monstrous alien warlord who is just bent on killing and destruction. At least that's the way the movie made it seem, pushing the science aspects, the scheming, the logic, all that stuff kind of got forgotten. In fact, he only has one discernible English phrase in the whole movie.
Ohio, skibbity cat.
Now, paired with his domesticated fucking robot sandworm death machine, this guy can lay waste to huge areas, and we saw that only Prime could put this thing down. The comics, however, talk about how he domesticated this creature, and it didn't give us exactly how. I vaguely remember it being insinuated that he led a team of bots that maybe trapped it, then maybe he fed it Energon or something so that it became loyal to him. But regardless, it means that Shockwave is one of two bots that are known to have gotten the better of it one way or another. The comics elaborated in other ways too, but the only real other example of him being a scientist was when he made a mysterious machine on Earth involving control software contained in a brain unit drone. Or brains, basically. He supervises and troubleshoots this project, showing he's engineering and directing complex technology while others do his bidding. So not a lot of the super genius stuff here in the comics either, but loads of battle victories against Long Arm, Salvage, Knockout, Dune Runner, Jolt, Elita 1, as well as shooting down Wheeljack and Mirage. And the only real defeats that he had were at the hands of Opie. Here, when he was driven off after failing to capture Elita 1, took on an Ironhide and Optimus tag team, and he got resoundingly beaten and chased away. And in this battle right here, had it not been for the driller, Optimus would have crushed him. Just looking at his design in the comics, he's way more purple now. And on this cover, he's got a huge arm squared off cannon. Like, look at the size of that thing. His ailerons or horns are pointing back up, and he has a fin in the middle of his head now. Shoulder spikes look cool, and an interesting chest plate. I like it. Anyway, back to the movie. The Bayverse wreckers fired on him, and he used a car to shield himself, but to be honest, probably didn't need to. They would later manage to hit him in the eye though, which was one obvious weak point. But even this chest-shattering blow couldn't put him down for good, and it wasn't until Prime pinned him to the ground and then ripped his eye clean out through his throat that he finally went bye-bye. So in terms of power, I'm going to put this guy fairly high on the list. There's no Autobot that hasn't been Matrix enhanced that can hold a candle to him. Megatron could probably beat him. The Fallen obviously could. Devastator perhaps, if any of them managed to catch him without support from the Driller. Fairly low score for influence and schemes, not that he's not part of any, it's just that the emphasis is on other facets of the character. He is far from dumb, but not the super genius we see elsewhere, so I reckon he slots in around the 4th place. Another interesting incarnation was this guy from Transformers the Game. Oh, that chest grows back. He's an interesting one, this one. Not a playable character, but a boss in the Autobot campaign. This game is one I've never played, actually, but anyway, he was a triple changer in this one, with both an artillery cannon and a helicopter for alt modes. He's quite a bit bulkier than Prime here. Taller, too. Again, beaten by Prime without too much of a fuss. It's quite hard to say how powerful he is, so I'm going to place him fairly low on the list because Prime did make quite short work of him. He was also in the PSP game, which had such happy music. Adopting a tank/artillery cannon as his alt mode. Not entirely sure what it's supposed to be. But the only face-to-face he had was with Starscream for the leadership of the cons. It was a pretty terrible game this, so this one is non-conclusive. If I was pushed to draw a conclusion, I'd say he was one of the weaker ones.
eradicate all organic life on this planet.
Design-wise, the big difference with Cyberverse Shockwave was his alt mode. Sure, his bot mode was blockier again, more vibrant color-wise, he had longer ailerons, as well as what looked like a smaller eye on the top of his head. But the biggest change was definitely the Spider Tank alt mode. He seemed to mass shift up a little as he assumed this bizarre walking tank form that I can only assume had an advantage of traversing difficult terrains over the tank track, or the hover tank. He had quite a high rate of fire, with the legs absorbing recoil to keep the shot steady. Now, this incarnation of the character also created himself an army of mini-me drones that could walk along walls or even on ceilings, so I wonder if the main Shockwave could do that too. Cyberverse really pushed the inventor side of his character, I feel. He was creating not only drones, but the cortical psychic patch, control modules. Oh wow, he strapped his ailerons to a GameCube controller and made it fly! Holograms, magnetic disruptors, and even a planet smasher. Oh, and moon-moving rockets. This firmly establishes him as a high-tier intellect and engineer, easily one of the most dangerous minds in this show. Despite his weapons and tank mode, he tends to retreat as soon as a fight goes badly, and his wins often come from his inventions or his drones, not personal combat. He's defeated or thwarted multiple times by Bumblebee, Grimlock,
Yes, Shockwave, it is I, Grimlock.
or even Teletran X. In terms of direct influence over Cybertronian history, the plan that really stands out is the one to reprogram Vector Sigma. It would have rewritten Cybertronian biology and prolonged Decepticon dominance. Luckily for the Autobots though, his plan was thwarted, so his influence remains mostly scientific, not political or military. As a scientist though, his schemes are almost too many to count. So this Shockwave is portrayed as a top-tier Decepticon scientist and strategist with enormous destructive potential through his inventions. However, in direct combat, he's only really mid-level, competent, but not dominant. So Cyberverse Shocky scores highly for his smarts. He's off the charts when it comes to his schemes, but loses out in terms of physical power. So I'm putting him round about here in the lower midsection.
Let's go out with fireworks.
Let's talk about Earthspark Shockwave, a more slimmed down and streamlined version of the character, still with wide chest and shoulders, but with narrower hips, slighter legs, and a noticeably less wide head. His cannon arm is pretty different as well, now looking like a harpoon-like spike, or it can still blast out the boom booms. And there's one ep where you see a close-up of the barrel and see that it's actually 3 mini barrels. But it also doubles as a grapple, not necessarily just to spear stuff, but the point can split into 3 sort of fingers to wrap around objects and then pull them closer. It's got some pretty fine motoric skills too. He once gripped a comic book with this thing. Oh, look, IDW murder porn. It's also got a mind scanning function. Handy. This guy also had the walking tank alt mode, only this time he was on roller skates. My guess being that this is for extra agility, as we saw in a big battle that he had with Megs, where he more than held his own. This was an interesting battle because I don't feel like he quite matched Megatron in terms of strength, but he wasn't far off and actually outmatched him for speed and agility. Now, although I really do like his robot mode, I am not a fan of the alt mode. I find it especially odd that he doesn't really have a tank cannon of any kind, and he just fires his blasts out of this sort of central yellow, I don't know, what would you call it, this panel. Anyway, like I said, power-wise, he can physically fight Megatron, and even kind of outsmart him, setting a trap for him with this force field to trap him in this area that he intended to blow sky high. He held his own in battles against Autobots and Terrans multiple times, often requiring teamwork or special weapons like the Immobilizer to stop him. He laid waste to this town when he went on a rampage. He successfully captured Prowl and contributed to Optimus's defeat, showing that he is a credible threat to even top Autobots. But he is not invincible in combat. Megatron would eventually defeat him in this battle by shooting him with the Immobilizer after he'd been distracted by a child. He was restrained by Goids, and his town-destroying rampage was brought to a halt by 2 small children. Yeah, one ran up his arm to cut the cable to his arm cannon, and the other one clobbered him in the eye with his Energon shield. But why didn't he just move his arm? Why did he let her run up there like that? Yet to be fair, he was under Mandroid's mind control at the time, so let's not hold this one against him. Drained of Energon by Mandroid and outmaneuvered by Hashtag. I did feel like his alt mode let him down a little in the chase part of this battle. Then I guess what do you expect from something that looks like it was out of a 50s B movie? Then I thought he was going to do better when they went to robot mode, only for him to get smacked upside the chin by Hashtag. Yeah, this was a pretty poor showing, there's no 2 ways about it. So like a few of his other incarnations, many of his achievements come from the tech that he invents or the plans that he comes up with, and he's another one who retreats quite quickly as soon as he sees the battle turning. But again, that's logical, so I feel like these are just Shockwave traits. He did seize the leadership of the cons, but his authority is often contested or cut short. So this guy is no pushover, but it's those defeats that really cost this incarnation and earn him a fairly low place on the list. It's said that the War for Cybertron incarnation deliberately deleted his emotion subroutines rather than have it enforced upon him, like the IDW version. And it's probably a good job that he did, because I tell you, living with some of this shit, like I'm traumatized just from reading about it. This enabled him to torture Ultra Magnus, experimenting on his corpse after Megs executed him, turning his dead body into a transmitter with which he could broadcast a horrible virus that ravaged Autobot systems and revealed the location of the Ark to all and sundry. He designed and oversaw construction of the Nemesis and began harvesting Cybertron's remaining population from both factions to fuel their escape ship. And after Megs and co left on the Nemesis, he stayed behind to harvest the rest of Cybertron's remaining residents. So again, this guy is all about the big genocidal plans rather than getting into individual brawls. Like many of the other incarnations though, that doesn't mean that he can't hold his own in a fight. We just don't get to see that much of it. We did see that he created cloaking tech for himself, and he overpowered Elita 1, but you'd expect that. So War for Cybertron, Shockwave gets top marks for his science morphs, scores high for his schemes but nowhere near the outlandish schemes of the Cyberverse incarnation, and is maybe a little more powerful in terms of physical power, although I'm guessing really when it comes to his alt mode because I don't remember ever seeing it. Basically, I would put him just below Cyberverse Shockwave just because of that guy's schemes, which is so wild. Okay, let's do the aligned version now, and let's start with IDW's Fall of Cybertron comic. Look at this guy, I love this design. This version obviously hasn't visited Earth yet, so he's in full Cybertron mode and has a fucking awesome looking jet mode. The way this transforms, the arm cannon ends up right in the front and center, in the nose. Snouts out these huge purple blasts of hot energy. Snout blast, go! I love the way the canopy sits at the back at the rear third, like right in front of this huge rocket booster and between these two backward facing wings. Can't remember what they're called, there's a name for them, but they always look badass. The fins at the front too, I mean, this is just one of the best designs. I find him generally more industrial looking somehow, with all of these intricate lines that reflect the architecture of Cybertron itself. And of course, I love his cannon with the 3 barrels in one look. In this story, Grimlock sends Swoop behind enemy lines to investigate how the cons now seem to have a near limitless supply of Energon when they are on the verge of running out. Swoop goes missing, and Grimmy, receiving an emergency signal from him, goes in to get him back, only to come face to face with Shockwave, who not only seems to know all of Grimlock's weaknesses, but also allowed Swoop to make the emergency transmission. So he was in fact luring Grimlock into a trap the whole time. He shoves his thumb into Grimlock's eye right here, before explaining that he wants to convert Grimlock into his ultimate weapon, and planning to give him an alt mode based on these fearsome creatures that he saw in Earth's distant past, obviously stringing him up and torturing him up a bunch in the process. Rage of the Dinobots changed his design again, it being more in line with the Transformers Prime cartoon this time. Look at this guy, he wide, man, wide! The head design is significantly different too, I find. Rather than the neck supporting the hexagon head, which houses the eye, now the neck supports and holds the cylinder of the eye itself, and the hexagon is more of like a surround. The cannon is enormous now. Look at the size of the servos required to support it. Love this design, absolutely love it. So once again, he can throw up force fields that are strong enough to deflect fire from all 5 Dinobots simultaneously, and he can send out this little drone that emits a huge EMP burst that somehow doesn't affect him. Anyway, the Dinobots eventually got their revenge on him, beating him down and then ripping him limb from limb. Oh wow, we actually see Grimlock without his visor here. Somehow I never noticed that before. The true face of Grimlock, ladies and gents. But wait. This defeat was only temporary because this body turned out to be just one of Shockwave's avatars, which he said he had many of scattered across Cybertron in his many labs. Can you imagine if all these guys turned up at once for a battle? In the cartoon, his design was fairly similar. I cannot find a bad word to say about his tank mode. I love it. It's also got a boost mode like the tumbler from Batman. Or maybe he just did a jump, I don't know. He defeats Autobots during the Dark Mount Siege, giving him a solo victory over multiple Autobots. Like here, when a single one of his cannon blasts sent Wheeljack and Bulkhead flying. This incarnation of the character was a pretty good match for Bulkhead, unlike the animated version. In fact, he took on both Bulkhead and Wheeljack, 2 of the Wrecker's heaviest hitters at the same time. And the 2 of them were really struggling with him. And I think that had Bumblebee and RC not intervened, Shockwave beats them all on his onesie. Cliff Jumper was no match here for him really, although he did manage to get him off his feet at one point. But not for long, because he smashed Cliff to the other side of the room. Shocky was also seen just shrugging off Cliff's laser fire, and both Cliff and RC, in their words, giving him everything they had, and he barely even noticed. He squashed Ratchet like a bug here, and then knocked the holy hell out of Smokescreen here. In this one, he managed to salvage part of the Predacon fossil and ground bridge it to the Nemesis for cloning purposes, despite interference from Bumblebee, Smokescreen, and Optimus. But he did have several defeats. Here he was blinded by RC. Here beaten by Ultra Magnus. He got his head stomped by Smokescreen. His lab was blued up by the Autobots. He had to flee when the good guys interrupted his plan to activate the Omega Lock. He was driven away by the upgraded Prime here. And he was, of course, overwhelmed by undead Predacons in Predacons Rising. So aligned Shockwave, and I know there are different incarnations of Shockwaves within this, but, fudging it all together, I would say that aligned Shockwave goes pretty high on the list. Just for comparison's sake, I doubt he could beat his version of Megatron. And being less powerful than OP Magnus and Grimlock, the top tier Autobot powerhouses, is kind of what you'd expect too. But the fact that he can beat Bulkhead and Wheeljack tells you everything you need to know. So yeah, like I said, fairly high place on this. I think third about does it. The IDW incarnation is probably considered more of a schemer than a brawler. Scheme. But that's just because his IDW schemes are so fucking elaborate. His scientific skills are unmatched too, with him having at one point or another outmatched every major scientific and strategic mind in the IDW continuity. G-Axis, Scorponok, Bludgeon, even Megatron all fear his intellect. But that's not to say he can't handle getting a little rough once in a while, because he destroyed an Omega Destructor. These were pretty much Omega Guardians that had been repurposed and amped by Zeta Prime in the Autocracy comic. This was him using his massive firepower and engineering knowledge too, to take down a capital scale weapon of mass destruction single-handedly. After the Dinobots stole his Energon cache, Shockwave destroyed the entire supply, preventing them from gaining it and keeping them from benefiting from his resources. If this was any other character, you'd say this was kind of petty, vindictive even. But nope, no emotions at work here, so just pure logic. He engineered the Combiners and the devastating Warriors Elite, equipping them with kill switches to ensure they didn't step out of line. And then in a mission to take out Omega Supreme, his unit failed to complete its objective, but did inflict serious Autobot casualties. Okay, I'm not going to call this one a defeat after all. He shot down the Axelon right here and reprogrammed the Maximals to battle each other in endless simulated war games. Oh, this is a pretty crazy design right here. I'm not sure which Maximal it is he's reskinned, but obviously in the simulation he's playing Shockwave, so he looks like this. Pretty epic. He dismantled the Dinobots again. A battle that he was losing until Swoop dropped a couple of boom cans on him, so he opted to use a rarely employed ability, which allowed him to basically channel his rage, shutting down his logic subroutines and engaging an overdrive combat mode, which gave us this epic moment where the Dinobots are just watching the flame. You know what, I'll just shut up and let the Doom music do the work. Anyway, you get the idea. This was a decisive dismantling of all 5 Dinobots. A huge victory. Seeing Shockwave defeat one of the most powerful Autobot strike teams all at once. Oh, that's just given me another idea for a video. All the times Shockwave showed emotion. How about that one? Juicy content bug. Here, he defeated Scorponok, a fearsome enemy with immense physical power and a genius-level intellect to rival Shockwave himself. Plus, he beat him while under a 24-hour kill countdown, which showed efficiency, intellect, and power under pressure. The human outfit Skywatch revived him with a bomb implanted in his head to control him, but he manipulated Soundwave into intercepting the detonation signal and freeing himself. At one point, he got arrested and thrown in jail by Magnus. Even while in prison, Shockwave recruits Bludgeon and the Monstructor 6 as his personal agents. This is a great example of the widespread of his influence, even though he was confined, showing that other high-ranking Decepticons will willingly serve him. He somehow resisted the D-Void's mind control that enslaved the minds of every other con, and instantly started mulling how he could use its methodology to improve Combiner technology. Making the bad of a best situation. What did I say? Making the bad of a... My brain is so fucked. Making the best out of a bad situation, he manipulated Bludgeon and Monstructor into freeing G-Axis from Autobot captivity, and he re-established his Regenesis project through them. he convinced the Ammonite race, a civilization embroiled in a cold civil war, to serve him by promising to end their conflict. He then used them as his proxy army. He infected Metroplex with one of his ores, he assassinated Diatlas, he executed Bumblebee, which is a big one because he was the leader of all of Cybertron at the time.
Oh no, the smoke out the mouth again.
And casually achieved immortality with another one of his ores, which he demonstrated by using Dreadwing as a guinea pig, then killing him only for him to instantly revive. Shockwave had effectively secured control over life and death itself. The catch being that it's only within a specific area, like this cave where the ore grew. So this battle here with Soundwave, as cool as it was totally pointless because they were both in this cave at the time, so it was impossible to draw a clear winner. And Shockwave allowed Soundwave to leave, I guess, calling it a draw. And all this is before he uses the ore to attain near omnipotent power. Mastering time, space, life, and death, and then begins collapsing reality into a singularity before going back in time to rewrite all of history before creating Unicron. And you know what? I'll go into all the details of all that stuff in my most elaborate Shockwave schemes vid. But I can't not mention it here, can I? He killed Megatronus after allowing him to murder Primer. He killed Alpha Trion here. He destroyed Metro Titan. He killed Optimus right here, dropping him into a singularity that crushed him to atoms in an attempt to destroy the last remnant of Cybertronian faith. And by placing an ancient artifact of mass destruction called the Talisman on Cybertron right before Unicron was going to eat it, he effectively poisoned the planet in order to kill the Chaos God. And yeah, I could probably go on. So I've given him an 8 for physical power, loads of victories and assassinations and stuff like that in the continuity, which I feel outweigh the defeats. There are a few defeats, but an 8 because he's not a heavy brawler like the Aligned or the movie version, where he destroys this chart is with the schemes, influence over other bots and Cybertronian history, and scientific intellect. So you throw all that into the mix, whilst he might not be as physically powerful as the other two, as a whole, he has to take top spot. Like the other day I started wondering if me making this video wasn't a part of one of his elaborate schemes somehow. Anyway, let's throw some more onto the list. Let's see if he's still at the top spot by the end of the video.
Why should we follow you? We will follow you.
Not a huge deal to go on for Transformers 1, where he had quite a different role. His role was more comedic than anything, and he clearly had emotions.
Especially when he was unconscious.
He managed to fight off Arachnid's death trackers. We saw him get socked in the face hole by Elita 1. I love that the sound effect sounds nothing like steel hitting steel. And then mauled by Optimus when he wiped the floor with not just Shockwave, but Soundwave and Starscream as well. And because this guy is so different and there not being a lot to judge him on, he probably shouldn't be compared to the others at all. But, you know, let's do it anyway. So based on his physique, I'm going to say he doesn't go bottom. He has broad shoulders implying large motors and servos in there, and these abdominal ridges that are shaped in such a way that they look like that they're meant to be armor but engineered to give maximum flexibility. His armor plating looks lighter than, say, Megatron's or some of the heavier guys, because we can't forget that he's also going to need precision movement for his scientific work. The arm cannon has a hinge bracket and some kind of canister or valve on the underside, which might be some kind of clip that can be jettisoned and perhaps reloaded, or maybe some kind of pneumatic to give him enhanced recoil compensation. And he does show that he has some firepower right here, although there are two other bots causing this damage too. In short, he seems heavier set than, say, Starscream, so it's safe to say he's less agile, and I would surmise a strong yet efficient armor to weight ratio. So in physical confrontations, I'd expect him to exert extreme torque and stability, enough to overpower most mid-tier Autobots in raw strength, but he's obviously not up there with the upper tier, as we saw. But just basing on what we see in the movie, I'd give him a 5 in terms of physical power. I'd guess about the same for his alt mode, 0 influence, 0 schemes. He's not going to be dumb, is he? So I'd give him a 7 for intelligence. Put him pretty low on the list. I would say above Earthspark though, just because he looks that much more powerful. I'm kind of doubting that one though. What do you guys think? Which one's more powerful, Earthspark or Transformers 1? Let me know.
It's me. Who's running this 2-bit operation anyway?
Then there's Shock Blast, who killed a bunch of Autobot guards while escaping prison. He executed Padlock. Damaged the planet's Energon grid right here, crippling a key Autobot defense system. He outmaneuvered Wing Dagger, causing an Energon tower to fall on him, and basically forced the Autobots to retreat. Successful raid on Cybertron right here.
Holy God, go!
And he ambushed and blasted Optimus Prime here, interrupting his duel with Megatron. Then he destroyed Bulkhead's shuttle. This was a logistics run in the Autobot build-up to defend Jungle Planet, so it no doubt deprived them of vital supplies and ruined their plans. So some decent victories, but Bulkhead overpowered and beat him repeatedly here, and again here. Just bear in mind, this isn't the Bulkhead from Prime, this is another guy.
Bulkhead, get inside! Our
Are you kidding?
Wing Saber beat him up here, and then he was beaten by Megs before being crushed by Unicron. So he struck me as pretty beef as far as physical power goes, especially with the serious firepower that he has at his disposal. His particle beam cannon can apparently blast an enemy within a 10-mile radius. He also has a shield that he can whip out in the blink of an eye to deflect any sneaky sniper shots. His alt mode is pretty unique too, a military satellite that can send a wide array of information between Earth and Cybertron, and that can jam Autobot transmissions and defensive grids. The thing is, I've seen this thing flying around the stratosphere like a nimble jet, which is unusual for a satellite, right? But agility aside, the main advantage of having this as an alt mode is getting all that firepower to the sky, even into orbit, I guess, so he can hammer of dawn your ass. He can rapid fire with his secondary cannon too, check it out. This smaller bore but double barrel weapon that he carries on his other arm when he's in bot mode. He's one of those bots whose head doesn't get hidden whilst he's in his alt mode. It just sits there perched on top, which I find... no, not a fan of that really. There's a couple of schemes in here, starting out with self-serving ones, like bargaining with Megs after he escaped prison, and the main one being declaring that he intended to overthrow Megatron, which escalated and then culminated in him trying to seize Unicron's power for himself, but of course that backfired pretty hard when the immense power drove him completely insane. So what have we got? I'd say high marks for physical power, especially when you throw in all that firepower. High marks for an alt mode that can circumvent any terrain. Like even if you hide in a cave, his firepower can probably penetrate it. Plus it looks like it can outmaneuver other aerial threats when it needs to. Influence-wise, his strikes on the Energon grid and supply shuttles really swung the needle in the con's favor, but there's nothing that altered the entire timeline like, say, the IDW incarnation. I gave him a 4 for schemes for all the reasons I just spoke about, and a 7 for intelligence seems about realistic to me. So I reckon his physical power puts him above the War for Cybertron incarnation, but beneath Cyberverse because of his schemes and influence over the direction of the cons. I do reckon that those three, Animated, Cyberverse, and Energon, like you could find reasons to put them in any of those 3 slots. In the Energon universe, he was known for taking his time whilst torturing captives, as we saw with Ultra Magnus, who he made an absolute mess of. He inspired real fear in the enemy, as we saw here with Optimus, but also allies, as we saw with the Skuxoid, who managed to get away from him, sacrificing his ship to be stripped down by Shockwave, which I guess was better than the alternative. This is a good example of how this incarnation viewed everything as a resource. Probably because whilst on Cybertron he was so starved of resources that he was forced to put most of his troops into stasis. This was another incarnation that had emotions too. When Optimus claimed that he'd made Shockwave cry for mercy, you at first think that OP's just exaggerating for effect, until Shockwave flies off the handle angrily when reminded about it. With the help of a few other cons, he managed to overpower Prime, and then laughed about it, boasting to his fellow cons. I don't think he would have been able to do this alone though. He okay. My notes are a train wreck. He captured and subjugated Cliffjumper and Jazz, deliberately keeping them alive for painful experiments, and murdered Ratchet. Oh, I said that already. Fucking... Like I said, he psychologically broke poor Magnus by stripping away all his components until he was unrecognizable. The trauma was such that it turned one of Cybertron's greatest warriors into a fearful husk who could only pee in him panty before running away. He threatened to recycle Ravage, which was pretty heartless, then ran off excitedly to threaten to recycle all of the fucking ocean life on the planet, which was also pretty heartless. He kicked RC in the back, slapped Jazz in the mouth, and was about to drill into Cliffjumper's eye. His defeats include the time he was forced to retreat right here after being surprised by the sudden arrival of Elita 1. Optimus shot his arm off before crushing his head. Wait, Energon Universe animated series? What? His influence is far from non-existent as well, holding Cybertron together for years back in the day, keeping the war machine barely functional through nothing more than ruthless pragmatism. His decisions defined Cybertron's state when Soundwave later contacts him, before he took charge over the Earth-based cons and merged Cybertron's and Earth's orbit, which escalated the war to a cosmic scale and planetary scale warfare, and in so doing, triggered the Autobot counteroffensive that eventually led to his own destruction. So high-ish marks for influence. Physical power, I'm gonna go for a 7. He might have been more powerful than this, but we didn't really see much of him in physical confrontations. But all the same, a decent score because he did manage to pile drive Optimus, and his arm cannon did look like it was almost as powerful as Meg's fusion cannon. His alt mode was much less powerful than the other versions though, and he had to be held by other bots like G1 Meg, so a fairly low score there. But big schemes and high intelligence puts him higher than Shock Blast, but I think still lower than Cyberverse Shockwave. In the 2019 IDW continuity, he had some mixed fortunes when it came to cloning. On one hand, he managed to clone Sound Blaster, that was a great success, and although he tried the same cloning techniques with Skywarp, the resulting drones lacked the teleportation abilities of the original, so that was kind of a fail in the scientific stakes, I reckon. He'd later create Insecticon clones too, that he was kind of worried about, because if they ever realized how powerful they were, they might not want to be ordered around by the cons. Which is exactly what happened, and Shockwave had to send Rage and Hydra Dread to hunt the original 3 Insecticons down. And when that failed, he had to put his tail between his legs and give the Insecticon army its own autonomy, with the caveat that they would come and fight for him as and when he required. He was somewhat successful as a crime lord too, after first of all being put in charge of a terrorist group called the Rise by Megs, charged with sowing dissent so that the population would turn against the government. It was an organization that he grew significantly, strategically recruiting over 200 members to. They made numerous attempts to plunge society into disorder, the biggest example of which was getting a Titan to destroy the Tether, unmooring the Winged Moon, which was this huge energy generating device that they'd made. This was an act that not only shattered infrastructure but weakened governmental control and fulfilled Shockwave's objective of creating maximum instability. But he also established an organ harvesting operation that stripped Cybertronian victims for parts and shipped them back to Cybertron for use in his horrific experiments. On a mission to replenish the Rise's Energon, he sent a group out that got tangled up in a firefight, and Soundwave had to intervene to stop them getting captured and interrogated, and he had to kill them to stop them talking under interrogation. This debacle angered Megs proper and resulted in him beating the crap out of Shockwave. So overall, a very mixed bag for 2019 Shockwave. Mixed successes in terms of science, so the usual high marks for intelligence, but not super exceptional compared to the others. Physical power, I'm gonna rate him quite highly, mainly because of this insane armor that he can slip into that quadruples his firepower, plus 2 smaller cannons on his lower legs, plus these 2 foot blasters like the War for Cybertron toys had. He could also use his backpack as a platform to give him flight. Can't really give him a score for the alt mode because I couldn't find a single fucking panel of it. And as for influence, well, his work with the Rise definitely destabilized Cybertron and led to the growth of the Decepticons, which then mutated into the Decepticons. His schemes weren't as elaborate or far-reaching as some of the others, so kind of low mark there, which all with said puts him round about 9th on the table, beneath Shock Blast but above War for Cybertron. Phew, and I think that about does it. That was a long one. And so here it is, my final ranking. 2005 IDW successfully defending its top spot against all challengers, with his good brawling, huge firepower, and genius intellect that ripped up and rewrote all of history. Second to him, the OG Marvel incarnation, who to be fair, at times was pretty unrealistically overpowered, what with his combat skills and hugely powerful alt mode doing most of the heavy lifting for him. Aligned comes in third, followed by Berserker Wave from the Movieverse and Shapeshift Wave from Animated. I am doubting those two a little bit. My gut is telling me that they should be the other way around. But you know what? I don't really want to re-render that graphic again. Footing the table, we have Shockwave from the game, who despite 2 alt modes and a fearsome looking frame, folded pretty quickly without a huge amount of pressure from OP. But the main takeaway that I have from this whole thing is that, really, there is no weak version of Shockwave. So that's where I would place them all, but what do you think? Would you place them differently? Get in the comments and let me know. I could possibly start this as a series, like ranking more characters, but let's see how this video does. There's no point in me putting all this time in if it doesn't do that well. And if you do want to see that, let me know which characters, and make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss it. Thank you once again for all of the support you guys are constantly giving this channel, and I will see you very soon for the next one. Cheerio, bye.